I am going to try in these first few remarks over the next 10 minutes to give an overview and introduction to the first half of the evening. And then after the interval, I'm going to come back for another 10 minutes and reprise, if you like, what we said, and introduce the second half of the evening. The reason I'm doing it that way is because the evening splits very clearly into two parts, which you might think of as the how and the why of combating aging. In the first half of the session, we're going to hear from some luminaries in biology and biotechnology with regard to how aging can be challenged, in some cases already to a certain extent, and in particular going forward with future technology, especially future technology that comes under the heading of regenerative medicine. One of the big reasons that we chose to run this conference now and in California is because I expect there's nobody in this room who is ignorant of the leadership position that California holds in regenerative medicine worldwide, with not only the scientific expertise that exists across the state, but also the electoral support as demonstrated so strongly with Proposition 71 and such like. So it seems to me to be most appropriate that in California we should be beginning the process of educating the public and certainly policymakers and others to the renewed possibilities for applying regenerative medicine to the problem of aging. The title of my remarks that I put up here really sums it all up. Aging is bad for you. It's a degenerative condition. And because it's a degenerative condition, it is a theoretical target of regenerative medicine. What I've come to here today to tell you, and what my colleagues will be telling you over the next hour or so, my scientific colleagues, is that it is no longer simply a theoretical target of regenerative medicine. It is on its way to becoming a practical one. Why is that? Well, really it comes down to this definition of aging that I've written down here. And this is something that gerontologists, people who study the biology of aging, have essentially known for a very long time. But it has not always been stated quite so explicitly. Aging is very definitely a side effect of being alive in the first place. You accumulate various types of damage, just in the same way that a simple man-made machine, like a car, will accumulate damage as a side effect, a natural consequence of its normal operation. But equally, just like man-made machines, the human body can tolerate that damage with more or less no loss of functional performance for a very long time. And the damage only starts to really matter when it reaches a threshold of abundance that is prejudicial to the optimal performance of metabolism. In other words, the first half of life, we are accumulating microscopic molecular and cellular changes, but those changes at that time are harmless. Yet, of course, our remaining lifespan, our remaining expected lifespan, is becoming shorter and shorter. And we see that threshold emerge and actually translate into what I'm calling pathology, the various diseases of aging, the various other degenerative aspects of aging, only in the second half of life. What this means from the point of view of intervention, of postponing the degeneration of aging, the pathology of aging, is what's classically been interpreted like this, that there are essentially two alternatives. Either we can be what I'm going to call geriatricians, we can adopt a geriatrics approach, which is to try to slow down the progression of these pathologies. When they start to emerge at an early stage, try to in some way hold back the sands of time so that the pathologies don't become seriously problematic and life-threatening until a later age than they otherwise would. The second approach, which I'm calling here the gerontology approach, is to try to intervene at an earlier stage in the chain of events, to try to clean up metabolism, if you like, and prevent metabolism from laying down this damage, or at least slow down the rate at which it lays it down, so that, of course, the age at which the damage reaches this level of abundance that causes pathologies will be delayed. Now that sounds pretty good, these two alternatives. Why aren't they so good? Well, you know the answer to why the geriatrician's approach isn't very good. Here it is. Aging is very, very messy. An awful lot of things go wrong with us at the same time, and they exacerbate each other. It's basically a downward spiral, a vicious cycle. There's essentially no way of holding that back by more than a little bit. So the geriatrician's job is not a happy one, if you like. It's a short-termist approach. Geriatricians are not completely useless. What a geriatrician can do is better than nothing, but it's not much better, and it never will be, because the precursors of the pathologies that are the target of the geriatrician are continuing to accumulate as side effects of our normal metabolism, and so the geriatrician's job is always going to be becoming harder and harder as the patient gets older and older. That's not going to change. So, okay, the geriatrician's approach is not really very promising. What about the gerontologist's approach? Well, unfortunately, there's a problem there as well. Here it is. Metabolism is very complicated indeed. In fact, any biologist will tell you that this is a considerable oversimplification of what we know about how cells work, let alone how organisms work. In fact, it's worse than that, because in fact this is an oversimplification of what we know about how cells work and organisms work. And that, as again any biologist will tell you, is completely dwarfed by the enormous amount that we don't know. Even leaving out all the stuff that we don't even know that we don't know, and so on. So basically it's a situation in which we simply don't know enough. We are not in a position to mess with this machine in a manner that doesn't do more harm than good. And that is what has led most gerontologists to the rather pessimistic and fatalist view that intervention in aging to achieve any significant extension of healthy lifespan is a concept whose time has definitely not yet come. The reason I'm standing here today, and the reason I have made such a nuisance of myself over the past decade or so, is that I have seen a different way of looking at this problem. This is a somewhat humorous approach to way of putting what I just said about the gerontologist problem. Some of my colleagues wrote an article in Scientific American a few years ago, and this was the cover of that issue. They suggested that the only way we could actually live longer than we do in a healthy state would be to implement what one might call design improvements to the human body. And these design improvements were suggested distinctly tongue-in-cheek, though it must be said that not everyone really saw the joke. You know, things like building the knees backwards and changing the curvature of the neck and making the ears bigger and things. But of course, the thing about this is that it does actually rather strongly encapsulate the reason why this logic is incorrect. Because if we go back again to simple machines, then we can see that actually there are two ways to make a machine. advance of regenerative medicine in the next decade, namely Dr. William Heseltine. Thank you very much.